Silence is a language of its own, and when used intentionally, it can be more powerful than any argument, any explanation, or any comeback. Most people underestimate just how much silence can shift the balance of power in any interaction. They think words are what make the biggest impact. Raising your voice, proving a point, getting the last word. But the truth is, silence unsettles people in ways they don't even realize. It leaves them alone with their thoughts, with their insecurities, with the weight of their own words echoing back at them. And for someone with a fragile ego, that is the worst place to be. People who rely on their ego to navigate the world feed off of reactions. They poke, they provoke, they throw out comments designed to get under your skin, and they wait. They wait for you to defend yourself, to argue, to justify, to explain. Because the moment you do, they know they've won. You've engaged, you've given them space in your mind, and now they have something to work with. But when you refuse to give them that, when you meet their arrogance with indifference, their need for attention with silence, that's when their confidence starts to crack. Ego-driven people don't just want to be heard, they need to be heard. They need to feel important, relevant, in control. Your silence doesn't just deny them attention, it forces them to question everything. Why aren't you responding? Why aren't you defending yourself? Did they say something wrong? Are they not as powerful as they thought? The absence of your words leaves a space they can't stand, so they try to fill it. They repeat themselves, they escalate, they scramble to regain the upper hand, and the more they do, the more obvious it becomes that their strength was never real, it was always dependent on your reaction. This isn't about ignoring people or being dismissive for the sake of it. It's about understanding when someone truly deserves your energy and when they're just looking for an audience. Not everyone is worth a response. Not every situation requires your input. Some people only seek engagement so they can twist the narrative in their favor, so they can manipulate the conversation to suit their own needs. But when you refuse to play along, when you stay silent in the moments they expect you to break, you hold all the power. And that's when reality sets in for them. They aren't as dominant as they thought. Their words don't carry the weight they assumed. And worst of all, they aren't in control of the situation. You are. Not because you outspoke them, not because you out-argued them, but because you chose to say nothing at all. Validation is the lifeblood of the fragile ego. It craves attention, approval, and reassurance like oxygen. It thrives on the idea that others are watching, reacting, and acknowledging its presence. The moment you take that away, the moment you refuse to feed into that endless need for validation, the cracks begin to show. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the absence of approval. And for someone whose self-worth is built on being noticed, that is the ultimate destruction. Ego-drinking people don't just want to be right, they need you to confirm it. They need you to engage, to debate, to argue. Because even in conflict, there is still a tension. Even when you disagree, you're still acknowledging their significance. But when you choose silence, when you don't give them the satisfaction of a reaction, you're sending a message far louder than words ever could. You are irrelevant to me, and nothing stings more than that. Think about it. When someone insults you, when they try to provoke a response, what happens if you don't give them one? If you don't argue back, if you don't get defensive, if you don't even flinch? They are left with nothing, no victory, no power, no validation that their words mattered. Their ego is left stranded, desperate for confirmation that they still have control over the situation. They will try again, pushing harder, getting louder, searching for any sign that they've made an impact. And when they get nothing, that's when the frustration sets in. That's when the self-doubt creeps in. That's when they start to question if they ever had any power over you at all. It's a brutal reality check. The person they once controlled with words, with manipulation, with guilt trips or passive-aggressive remarks, is now untouchable. And there is nothing more terrifying for an insecure ego than realizing it no longer has an effect. Your silence forces them to face the uncomfortable truth that their validation must come from within. And for someone who has spent their entire life relying on external approval, that is a terrifying thought. But the beauty of it is, you're not being cruel, you're not attacking, you're not playing games. You're simply choosing where to invest your energy. And when you stop investing it in people who need constant reassurance, who rely on others to feel important, you take away their strongest weapon. No reaction, no argument, no validation, just silence. Silence has a way of exposing people to their own thoughts in a way that words never could. When you refuse to engage, when you don't defend, explain, or justify, you force the other person to sit with their own words, their own actions, and their own intentions. And for someone with a fragile ego, that can be an incredibly uncomfortable place to be. They're so used to deflecting, shifting blame, and avoiding responsibility that they never truly have to confront themselves. But your silence changes that. It removes all distractions, all counter-arguments, all ways to twist the narrative, leaving only one thing left to face: themselves. Ego-driven people survive on external noise. They surround themselves with opinions, arguments, and constant validation to avoid looking inward. The moment the noise stops, the moment no one is feeding into their version of reality, the silence becomes deafening. They start questioning, overthinking, replaying past interactions in their heads. They wonder why you didn't respond. Did they say something wrong? Were they out of line? Are they not as in control as they thought? That uncertainty alone can be enough to make their confidence waver. Most people don't realize how much self-reflection can feel like a punishment to those who have spent their entire lives avoiding it. They're not used to it. They've built their identity on external reinforcement, being right, being praised, being acknowledged. When that is taken away, when they are left alone with nothing but their own thoughts, it forces them into a place they don't know how to navigate. And in that place, the truth starts creeping in. The cracks start forming. They start seeing themselves in a way they never have before. The thing about silence is that it's not just a lack of words. It's a mirror. It reflects everything back onto the person standing in front of it. And for someone who has spent years building a version of themselves that relies on control, validation, and superiority, that reflection can be unbearable. It's easy to dismiss criticism when you're too busy arguing. It's easy to avoid accountability when you're focused on proving a point. But when you take all of that away, when there's no debate, no conflict, no opportunity to shift the blame, the only thing left is the truth. And the truth has a way of breaking down even the strongest egos. You don't need to tell them they were wrong. You don't need to prove anything. Just step back, let the silence do its work. Let it be the weight that forces them to sit with their own reality. And in that silence, they will either grow or they will break. Control is everything to someone with a fragile ego. They want to dictate the conversation, steer the narrative, and manipulate reactions to maintain their sense of dominance. They thrive on knowing they can push a button and get the exact response they're looking for, whether it's anger, frustration, or desperation to explain yourself. It reassures them that they still have power, that they can still affect you, that they are still in control. But what happens when you don't react? When you don't play along, when you take away the one thing they rely on the most, your engagement? That's when the real struggle begins. Silence is the ultimate shift in power. It flips the entire dynamic on its head. Instead of them controlling the situation, they find themselves scrambling for a response, desperate to regain the upper hand. The more they try to provoke, the more frustrated they become when you refuse to take the bait. It's not just that they want to win. It's that they need to feel like they're the ones dictating how things unfold. And when you take that away, they start losing grip on the very thing they built their identity around. People who manipulate conversations rely on patterns. They say things designed to trigger a reaction, to put you on the defensive, to pull you into their game where they hold all the cards. But when you don't engage, when you break that pattern, they have nothing to work with. They expect resistance. They expect justification. They expect you to explain yourself just so they can twist your words into something that benefits them. But silence gives them nothing to hold on to. It forces them to sit with the weight of their own words and actions without an escape route. And here's the thing. When they realize they can't control you, when they see that no matter what they say or do, you won't respond the way they want, that's when their ego takes the biggest hit. Because it was never about the argument, never about being right. It was always about having control over you. And once that control is gone, they are left feeling powerless, exposed, and uncertain in a way they never expected. This isn't about giving someone the silent treatment out of spite. It's about understanding that not every battle is worth fighting, that not every person deserves a response, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to engage. Let them wrestle with their own words. Let them feel the weight of a conversation they can no longer control. Because when you take away their ability to dictate the outcome, you remind them of something they never wanted to face. Without control, their ego has nothing left to stand on. Emotional detachment is one of the most powerful things you can master, especially when dealing with people who thrive on control, drama, and validation. They expect you to care. They expect you to react. They expect to see some proof that their words, their presence, their actions hold weight in your life. And when you don't give them that, when you remain unshaken, unaffected, and emotionally distant, that's when their ego takes the biggest hit. For someone whose identity is built on being significant in the eyes of others, your indifference is their worst nightmare. They want to believe they matter to you, even if it's in a negative way. They would rather see you angry, frustrated, or hurt than see you move on without a second thought. Because as long as they can get an emotional reaction from you, they can convince themselves they still have a hold over you. But when you detach, when you refuse to invest in their games, they are forced to confront a painful truth. They don't matter as much as they thought. This is where silence becomes so much more than just a lack of words. It becomes a statement, a message that says, "You are no longer important enough to affect me." And that message is far more devastating than any argument or insult could ever be. Because at the core of every fragile ego is the fear of being insignificant, of being forgotten, of losing influence. They want to feel needed, whether it's through admiration or conflict. And when you give them nothing, no praise, no anger, no resentment, they begin to feel like they don't exist in your world at all. The beauty of emotional detachment is that it gives you back your power. You no longer waste energy trying to prove a point to someone who isn't listening. No longer exhaust yourself seeking closure from someone who will never give it to you. You no longer hand over your emotions to someone who only wants to use them as a tool for control. Instead, you walk away. And in doing so, you leave them alone with their own insecurities. And that's when the ego begins to crack. Because without an audience, without a reaction, without the satisfaction of knowing they still have a grip on you, they are left with nothing but themselves. And for some, that is the most unbearable thing of all. Actions will always speak louder than words, and nothing proves that more than silence paired with undeniable progress. People with fragile egos rely on words to assert their dominance. They argue, they manipulate, they talk in circles just to maintain the illusion of control. They want you caught up in explaining yourself, defending yourself, proving yourself to them. Because as long as they can keep you in that cycle, they can convince themselves that they still have a place in your life. But when you stop engaging, when you remove yourself from the conversation entirely and let your actions do all the talking, that's when their ego takes the hardest hit. Ego-driven people want to believe they are the center of everything. They want to believe that your choices, your emotions, your actions somehow revolve around them. So when you shift your focus away from proving something to them and instead put all your energy into becoming better, growing stronger, and achieving more, it forces them to recognize that they were never as important as they thought. And that is something their ego cannot handle. The best response is always results. You don't have to announce what you're doing. You don't have to justify your decisions. Just move, just build, just evolve. And when they look up one day and realize you've become someone they can no longer reach, someone they can no longer control, someone who no longer even acknowledges their existence, that's when they truly lose. Because at the end of the day, silence isn't just about refusing to speak. It's about refusing to stay in a place that no longer serves you. And when you do that, when you walk away without a word and let your progress speak for itself, their ego doesn't just take a hit, it shatters.